This is the craziest Torah portion. It has, as we heard from Maya earlier and Rabbi Davis, we have the binding of Isaac and the birth of Isaac. We have the almost death of Sarah, although we'll read about that next week. And we have the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. Now, the story, of course, is famous, and it's usually the story that we don't give a Devar Torah about on Shabbat morning, because who wants to talk about destruction? We know the reference to fire and brimstone. We know the references and the details of the story of Lot's wife turning into a pillar of salt. But year after year, I ask the question, what possibly could the people of Sodom and Gomorrah, or Sdom ve'Amorah, have done to warrant this destruction? Because we know at the end of Parshat Noach, not too long ago, God promises not to destroy the world again. So we ask the question, maybe this is a loophole. God promises not to destroy the world with water. This was fire. God says, I'm not going to destroy the whole world. This is just 2 cities. But at least to me, that doesn't work. This is destruction. And I want to know why. Because there is a religious history to this in the Judeo-Christian tradition, which I want to reject first and foremost. And the term sodomy comes from this episode. So let me give you a little bit of backstory and a little bit of background to the parasha. 2 angels come to town to destroy it. And almost by happenstance, Lot invites them in. They try to decline his invitation. They're walking through town. He's sitting at the gateway to the entrance. He says, come, let me give you some hospitality, similar to what Rabbi Davis was talking about with Hachnasat Orchim. And they say, no, and Lot insists. The townsfolk want to have their way with them. Lot offers his virgin daughters in their stead, which to me I find completely despicable. The angels who appear to Lot as these 2 visitors blind the bad guys with some sort of divine bomb of light. And then fast forward to towards the end of the story, Lot and his family get saved. And for the past several hundred years, in legislation in this country, we use the term sodomy referring to the city of Sodom. And the rabbis then say, oh, this must be the reason that these cities are destroyed. To me, that cannot be the reason. The entire scene is reprehensible for so many reasons. And to be clear, I'm going on record, as many of my colleagues have, this parasha is not an assault on homosexuality. This is an assault on rape. This is an assault on disregard for humanity. This is a result and an assault on so many other things. And yet the reason for God to destroy these towns is still not explicit. I would suggest that we have to look earlier at a more peculiar verse in the parasha when God tells Abraham that God is going to destroy it. And the verse, which the Hebrew is weird and the translation is not quite clear, at least in the rabbi's mind, seems to indicate everything. The verse is the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah is so great and their sin is so grave. Za'akat Sodom va'Amorah ki rabbah v'chatotam ki chavda ma'od. It's parallel structure. Za'akat, this cry of Sodom va'Amorah, Sodom va'Amorah ki rabbah is so great. V'chatotam, and their sin ki chavda ma'od, kaved. It's so heavy, it's so grave. And the rabbis debate what this really means. What does it mean for the cry to be so great and their sin to be so heavy? Ibn Ezra, the great medieval commentator, says, what does it mean the cry is so great and the sin is so heavy? The blasphemy is profound, or the victim's cry is so great because of violence. Why does God destroy these cities or want to destroy these cities? Because the violence abounds and people are crying out left and right. Option A. Option B, if you look at Ramban, who often comments on Ibn Ezra, he says, no, what is this cry? This is the cry of oppression. This is the cry of people crying out, begging for help from the arm of wickedness. It's not violence, it's just altogether wickedness. There wasn't one person in this city who didn't have wickedness in their heart. And then if we want to go more psychological, the Or HaChaim, he says, God also wanted to cool Abraham's enthusiasm for saving such a wicked people. This is why God told Abraham that their sins were so grave and so numerous. It's as if God was exaggerating, so Abraham didn't want to negotiate and barter with God. God wanted to destroy them, and maybe the reason wasn't such a good reason. Now, perhaps of no surprise, none of this works for me. But believe it or not, the answer to this question, as Sarah was saying, the rabbis ask questions, the answer to this question is straightforward, explicit in the Talmud. It says precisely why God wanted to destroy these cities. And it's based on this verse of the cry being so great and the sin being so grave that this word Rabbi is actually a secret code word for us. And the rabbis in the Talmud tell a story, and it's another backstory that we don't read in the Torah. What's the backstory? When a poor person would come to the town of Sodom, every person in town would approach that poor person and give them a dinar, a coin. And they would write their name, they would etch their name into the coin. And if that poor person, who now had a bounty of coins, would go into the shop to buy some bread, and the storekeeper saw a name written on the coin, they would say, it's a poor person, I'm not going to sell them any bread. So it's as if all of the villagers were acting generous, pretending to be so, but they all had this secret plan to make sure that the poor were not taken care of. And then when that person would die because they couldn't buy bread in town, everyone could come and claim the coin that they wrote their name on. It's horrible. Absolutely horrible. The Talmud then continues in Masechet Sanhedrin that there was once this young woman who would take bread out to poor people hidden in a pitcher so that the villagers would not know. She was a water bearer. Perhaps her name was Maya. And she would come with this pitcher with bread hidden in, and she would go up to the poor person saying, would you like a drink? They would say, I'm not thirsty. And she would give them the pitcher, say, when you're thirsty, have some water. They would look inside, see the bread, go into their home, and they'd be sated. One day, the matter was revealed to all the townsfolk. They apprehended this wonderful woman. They smeared her with honey and set free hornets to kill her. Horrific. Absolutely horrendous. The cry was great. According to Rav Yehuda, he said in the name of Rav, that Rava, this cry being great, is an allusion to the word Riva, this young woman. God wanted to destroy this city because not of all of these other things, but when they killed this woman for her act of kindness, their fate was sealed. The sins of Sodom and Gomorrah was not that they were not kind. It's that any time someone provided a kindness to someone else, they persecuted the generous one. And it was the same with Lot. That's the nuance. Any time someone tried kindness, they ensured that that person was punished. Our challenge, at least in my mind, this Shabbat, is actually hidden in the name of the parasha, Vayera, to appear, and he appeared. We have to not only show kindness to others, we have to not only go out and be generous and considerate and merciful, but anytime we see someone else showing kindness, we have to stand up for them, especially at the risk of their and our own personal safety. Because we live in a time where people are persecuted regularly, and you can almost do no right. Whether that's because of political correctness, whether that's because of risk of losing one's job or offending a family member. And sometimes people are just trying to be kind. Worst case scenario, we devolve into Sodom and Gomorrah. Best case scenario, we do right and defend those for doing right and help others be kind to each other. Because otherwise, God's not going to destroy the world again, and we will be the ones to destroy it. But we could also be the ones to save it. Shabbat shalom.